Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Outcast, Her Royal Harem, Ember, #1, by Catherine Banks. And this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1. I'd been up all night tending to the latest injured shifter to appear on my porch. The wolf shifter could have easily been mistaken for a werewolf, but I'd heard him while cleaning his wounds, and his body partially shifted, revealing a draconic head. His secondary form was a dragon. Thankfully, he'd passed out before roasting me in flames. We weren't exactly certain why, but if a hybrid was part shifter, they often had a shifter form not previously seen. For example, there were dragons and wolves. Some elves could shift into foxes or owls, but there were hybrids who could shift into bears, lions, and more. The city bustled noisily in the distance as I sat atop my cabin in the woods, drinking my coffee and watching the sunrise. Those who lived in the city pretended I didn't exist, but I was okay with that. The only time they hassled me was when the kids came to see the evil witch in the woods, a term I found hilarious since witches didn't exist, but mages did. They loved the silly fairy tales of witches and dwarves. I preferred living in the wilderness with the animals I treated, my land, a personal paradise. The call of a hawk drew my eyes skyward. Kieran, a beautiful, ferruginous hawk I'd nursed back to health after finding him with torn wings and a cracked beak, circled twice overhead before heading deeper into the woods. Leaping up, I jumped from my roof, landing lightly on my feet, and jogged through the woods after him. After a few minutes, I heard the soft cry of a bear cub. Stopping, I closed my eyes and listened, trying to hear if there were hunters or anything ahead. The only sounds I could hear were the soft cries of the cub and a strained breathing pattern of something larger. Striding confidently through the trees ahead, my heart hurt at the sight of a tiny brown bear cub huddled against a giant brown bear that was bleeding from several cuts and barely breathing. "Looks like you got into one nasty fight, Mama," I called as I approached. The bear opened her eyes and snarled. I held up my hands. "Easy, darling. I'm here to help you and your cub. I mean no harm." The bear glared at me but stayed quiet. Good. I praised and walked around her, inspecting her injuries. "Was it that nasty Bruno? Keep trying to get him to leave my woods, but he won't leave. Perhaps I need to get a little more stern in my request." Bruno was a huge black bear with a nasty temper. I'd sent him flying a few times, but the persistent bear wouldn't move elsewhere. "Here," Kieran said, appearing beside me in his human form and holding out my medical kit. His long rust-colored hair, the same color as his leg feathers, fell into his face as he squatted down, forcing him to toss it back. "Thank you." I opened the kit and grabbed the items I needed to patch the mama bear back up. "Was it Bruno again?" he asked. "I think so, but she ain't talking to me right now," I said and smiled. "She doesn't trust me yet." Kieran peered down at the little bear cub that was silent and standing perfectly still, its tiny heart pounding hard at the sight of the man it could tell was the predator. "I'm not going to hurt you, little one," Kieran whispered. The cub slid beneath its mama's shoulder as far as it could without her being able to move. Clearly, it didn't believe him. I laughed softly and shook my head. "Those eyes take a bit to get used to, love." No matter what form he took, Kieran kept his jade green hawk eyes, something a lot of hybrid shifters dealt with, far more than full-blooded shifters. He made a humph sound, but said no more. It took over 2 hours for me to deal with the bear's wounds and another hour to convince her to eat the food Kieran brought. Finally, both Mama Bear and Baby Bear were fed, hydrated, and ready to return to the woods. Mama Bear let me pet her head and finally communicated with me. She admitted it wasn't Bruno, but an even bigger, meaner bear she'd never seen or smelled before. I promised I would investigate and try to ensure the woods were a little safer for her to raise her cub. The baby bear rubbed against my leg and, in a stunning turn of events, licked Kieran's outstretched hand before darting over to his mama. I leaned my head against Kieran's shoulder and smiled as we watched the bears head off into the woods. This was why I did it. This was why I left the niceties of suburban life and came out into the woods, away from 9-to-5 jobs and into a life where I made a difference. I saved as many animals as I could, treating their injuries and using my knowledge for a good purpose. My parents couldn't understand me and my desire to live this life, but I was okay with being the weird lady in the woods, so long as I could have moments like this. Kieran turned his head, looking back towards the house. There's growling at the house. Sighing, I repacked my medical kit, picked it up, and headed in the direction of home. Let's go see what's going on. At the house, we found the cheetah I'd patched up yesterday, its leg broken trying to leave. But Branson, a black bear form hybrid who'd been with me a couple months, blocked its path. What's going on? I called out sweetly. Branson turned and huffed. He freaked out when he woke up and was about to run off straight towards the city. He won't listen to me. I walked up next to Branson, slid my fingers into his thick fur, and faced the cheetah. Easy, friend. You were brought to me, your leg broken, and I set and bandaged it for you. We mean you no harm here. My friend here was trying to keep you from heading into the city. I jerked my head in the direction he had been trying to go. They don't like shifters nor hybrids very much there. The cheetah's eyes widened and he took a hesitant step forward. You can communicate telepathically with shifters? I nodded and smiled wide. Ever since I was a child, but it's not just shifters, but all animals. On cue, Winnie, an adorable pink teacup pig, trotted out of the barn and over to me, snorting and snuffling for attention. Hungry! I patted her head and chuckled. You're always hungry, Winnie. Don't worry, I'll get your food soon. First, we have to convince our friend here to join us. Raising my head, I asked, will you share a meal with us before you leave at least? The cheetah's body shuddered and shifted into a handsome man with high cheekbones, black hair, and piercing amber eyes. He was almost beautiful thanks to the high cheekbones and angular jaw, making me think he was likely a hybrid of elf and either werewolf or dragon shifter. Bowing, he said, I apologize for inconveniencing you and causing trouble. Stepping up to him, I patted his shoulder. I'm sure it was concerning to wake up in an unfamiliar house with so many different animal smells. I'm Ember. What may I call you? He picked my hand up and kissed my knuckles. I am Riddick. My heart fluttered and I felt my hand tingle where his lips had touched. That was new. Please, come inside and I'll find you some clothes. After rescuing more than a dozen animals that turned out to be hybrid shifters, I kept a variety of clothing available for them to take and learned to keep my eyes chest level and above. Branson bumped my back with his giant head. I'm going to go investigate the bear Kieran told me about. I'll return later. I turned and frowned at him. Are you certain you should go do that alone? You could wait for me to go with you. He stood on his hind legs, towering over me now at well over 7 feet tall, and growled. I'm not weak, Em. It took a lot of willpower to keep from smirking at the indignation in his voice, but I managed. Just promise me you'll be safe, okay? The mama bear was very scared of the bear that hurt her more than Bruno. Investigate, but don't engage for today, okay? Thumping back down to all 4 paws, he bobbed his head once. Yes, ma'am. I watched him trot off into the forest and felt a twinge of fear in my chest. Branson was a very strong fighter, but he wasn't at 100% yet, and the way this new bear had been described worried me. It felt like there was more going on than just a new bear in my territory. Kieran patted my shoulder as he walked by me and up the steps into the cabin. He'll be fine. I can see you're worried. I always worry when you all go out to investigate alone, I said, and stepped through the door he held open for me. We have to do our part or we feel like a burden, Kieran explained. A burden? How ridiculous. Just having them with me was a gift. With them here, I wasn't lonely, going insane slowly from only speaking to animals. Are you a mated couple? Riddick asked us as he looked at us. No, Kieran said with no hesitation, answering as I opened my mouth. I closed it and turned my head away to hide the hurt and rejection I felt. Kieran had been here for a full month, and though I could feel a spark of interest from him in the way he watched me, he never moved beyond friendly. Natalia, a beautiful raven with a permanently broken beak, flew from her perch to land on my shoulder and rubbed her head against my cheek. Good morning, Natalia. Are you going to explore the river again today? She had a strong desire to find shiny items and bring them to me. Lately, she'd been exploring the riverbanks, bringing shiny, almost clear rocks I had not seen before. They held a bit of magic in them, which was a little concerning. Natalia nodded, cawed, and flew towards the window, waiting patiently for me to open it. As soon as I pushed it open, she flew out and up into the sky. With a deep breath, I gathered myself, turned, opened the fridge, and took out the eggs and bacon from the top shelf. Breakfast time. Let's go.